When a man abandons his own child on the side of the road, he never imagined nature would do something even more unpredictable. And it changed everything. The clock on the wall marked exactly 3 o'clock in the afternoon when Richard Harrison signed the final document that sealed the purchase of yet another company for his empire. His office, on the top floor of the tallest building in Chicago, offered a privileged view of the city. Even through the typical drizzle of the windy city, Richard could contemplate his domain, a reflection of all the power he had amassed over the years. Congratulations, Mr. Harrison. With this acquisition, you become the largest businessman in the sector nationwide, said his lawyer, adjusting his thin-rimmed glasses. Richard nodded without enthusiasm. He extended his hand to receive the champagne flute his secretary offered him, but there was no sparkle in his eyes. Even in the face of such a momentous occasion, something was missing. "Thank you all. You may leave now," he ordered, without ceremony. When he was finally alone, Richard let the weight of his 50 years fall upon his shoulders. He swiveled his Italian leather chair to contemplate the grey horizon. The city seemed small from above, just like the people who inhabited it. Small and insignificant. He had surpassed them all, but at what cost? The silent office echoed the emptiness he felt inside. The walls, covered in fine wood paneling, bore witness to his solitude. Not even the numerous framed awards and certificates could fill the void that had been gnawing at him since— "No, not today," he murmured to himself, pushing away the memories that threatened to surface. His cell phone rang, bringing him back to reality. It was Jessica, his current girlfriend, 30 years younger, asking about plans for the night. Richard automatically replied that he would pick her up at 8. Another night of forced smiles, superficial conversations, and the feeling of playing a role. He opened a drawer and removed a small velvet box. Inside it, a silver locket that had belonged to Sarah, the only thing he had kept after that night. The cold metal between his fingers awakened memories that he fought daily to suppress. "Mr. Harrison," his secretary's voice through the intercom interrupted his thoughts. "Mr. Michael Thompson is here. He says it's urgent." Richard quickly put away the locket and resumed his usual posture. "Send him in." Michael had been his right-hand man for more than a decade. He entered the office with hurried steps and a worried expression he couldn't disguise. "Something's happened in Pine Creek," he announced without preamble. Richard's blood froze in his veins. Pine Creek, a name he had avoided pronouncing for years. "What happened?" he asked, keeping his voice firm. "It's about the animals at the reserve that you sponsor, specifically the buffalo. They're different. The manager can't explain it. He says he's never seen anything like it." Richard felt a shiver run down his spine. For a moment, the image of a baby crying in the darkness crossed his mind. "Explain better," he demanded, disguising the tremor in his hands as he poured himself some whiskey. "The animals are behaving in a coordinated manner, as if someone were commanding them. Especially one buffalo in particular, a black male that nobody can tame. The staff nicknamed him Shadow." The glass slipped between Richard's fingers and shattered on the floor. A name he hadn't heard in years echoed in his head. Nathan. "Prepare the jet," he ordered, rising to his feet. "We're going to Pine Creek immediately." Michael seemed surprised by his boss's disproportionate reaction to an apparently trivial problem with animals, but he dared not question it. Nobody ever questioned Richard Harrison. As Michael left to arrange the trip, Richard approached the window again. A storm was forming on the horizon, bringing with it heavy clouds and distant lightning. "After all these years," he whispered. To himself, could it be possible? The businessman felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time, fear. Could the empire he had built crumble before the ghost of his past? It was time to face what he had left behind on that deserted road 7 years ago. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give a like. Tell us what city you're watching from. We continue. In the modest house on the outskirts of Pine Creek, Ellen Morgan watched through the kitchen window as Nathan played in the yard. At 7 years old, the boy displayed an unusual serenity for his age. Even without sight, he moved through the space with surprising confidence, as if he could perceive every detail around him. "He's talking to Shadow again," commented Jack, approaching his wife with a cup of coffee. Ellen smiled, accustomed to the scene. The immense black buffalo remained lying near the boy, motionless as a statue. Only the animal's eyes moved, attentive to each gesture of the child. "Sometimes I wonder who protects whom," Ellen replied, resting her head on her husband's shoulder. Outside, Nathan was caressing the thick fur of the buffalo, whispering words that no one else could hear. The connection between them transcended any rational explanation. It was as if they shared a language of their own, inaccessible to the rest of the world. "You know, Shadow, I dreamed about her again today," the boy said with his soft voice. "The lady with long hair. She was sad, but she smiled at me. Do you think she was my real mother?" The buffalo emitted a deep, almost imperceptible sound and brought his muzzle closer to Nathan's face. The boy smiled, interpreting that gesture as an answer. "I feel that too. That one day I'll discover who I really am." Nathan put his hand to his chest, where he carried the small amulet hidden under his t-shirt. It was the only thing he had from his past, besides the faded blanket in which he had been found. Ellen and Jack had never hidden from him that he was adopted, nor the circumstances in which they had found him on that winter night. "Nathan," Ellen's voice interrupted the silent conversation, "it's lunchtime, son." "Coming, Mom," he replied, rising with agility. "Are you coming with me, Shadow?" The buffalo rose, imposing, and accompanied the boy to the edge of the yard. There it remained, as it always did, respecting human territory but remaining vigilant. At the simply set table, the family shared not only the meal, but a deep connection built over those 7 years. Jack, with his calloused fisherman's hands, served the fresh fish he had brought from the sea that morning. "How was school today, little one?" he asked, affectionately tousling his son's hair. "Teacher Amy said I'm the best music student in the school," Nathan replied proudly. "She was impressed because I learned to play a new song just by hearing it once." Ellen and Jack exchanged looks of pride. Nathan had always demonstrated extraordinary abilities, especially when it came to sounds and sensations. It was as if his other senses compensated for his absent vision in ways that transcended the normal. "That's wonderful." "Son," Ellen celebrated. "And what else happened?" Nathan hesitated for a moment, biting his lower lip. "There was something strange today. On the way back from school, Mr. George's street dogs started to follow me, all of them. Teacher Amy was scared, but I knew they didn't want to hurt me. He paused, uncertain. "They wanted to tell me something." Silence fell over the table. It wasn't the first time inexplicable things had happened around Nathan. Birds that perched on his shoulders, wild horses that approached gently, and now this. "And what did they want to tell you, son?" Jack asked, trying to sound casual. "That someone is coming," the boy answered naturally. "Someone important from my past." Ellen dropped her fork, which clinked against the plate. The fear she always carried in her chest, the fear that one day they might lose Nathan, intensified immediately. "It must just be imagination, dear," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Animals don't talk." "Not with words, Mom," Nathan explained as if it were obvious. "They speak with feelings, with images that appear in my head." Jack cleared his throat, changing the subject. Later, when Nathan was asleep, he would talk to Ellen about this. The boy's abilities seemed to be intensifying, and this worried them, not for the gift itself, but for what it might attract to them. After lunch, while Nathan practiced piano in the small living room, another talent that had emerged spontaneously, Ellen pulled Jack into the bedroom. "Do you think this has to do with the rumors in town?" she asked in a low voice. "About the rich man who bought the Buffalo Reserve?" "I don't know, honey, but we'll stay alert," Jack replied, hugging her to calm her fears. "Nathan is our son no matter what happens." What they couldn't see was the black buffalo that remained vigilant outside the house, with its eyes fixed on the road that led to town. Shadow seemed to sense something in the air, a distant presence that was rapidly approaching. In the sky, dark clouds were beginning to form, heralding a storm. The wind whispered among the trees, carrying with it the harbinger of inevitable changes. The small town of Pine Creek, until then peaceful and forgotten by time, was about to become the stage for a long-awaited encounter. The private jet cut through the skies toward Pine Creek, while the storm intensified outside. Richard Harrison watched the dark clouds through the window, feeling that each mile traveled brought him not only closer to a geographical destination, but to a reckoning with his past. "We'll arrive in 20 minutes, sir," the pilot informed. Through the intercom, Richard nodded silently. Beside him, Michael reviewed some documents about the Buffalo Reserve, a property that Richard had acquired 5 years ago, apparently as just another investment, but which hid deeper motivations. "The reports indicate that the abnormal behaviors began about 3 months ago," Michael commented. "It coincides with the arrival of the new veterinarian, Dr. Edward Paxson. Perhaps he—" "It's not the veterinarian," Richard interrupted, with a certainty he couldn't explain. Michael raised his eyebrows, surprised by his boss's conviction. "How can you be sure?" Richard didn't answer. How could he explain something that even he didn't fully understand? How to talk about the weight he had carried since that winter night, 7 years ago? About the guilt that consumed him from within, despite all efforts, to bury it under layers of success and power? "Prepare everything for our arrival," he ordered, ending the subject. "I want to visit the reserve today, no matter the time." Meanwhile, at the small municipal school in Pine Creek, Nathan was finishing his music class. His fingers glided over the piano keys with remarkable naturalness, drawing out notes that seemed to flow directly from his soul. "Amazing, Nathan," praised teacher Amy, a young woman in her early 20s who had recently moved to town. "You have a rare gift." The boy smiled, satisfied with the recognition. "Thank you, teacher. The music, it speaks to me, as if each note told a different story." Amy observed her student with fascination. In her years of musical training, she had never met someone with such sensitivity, especially a child so young. "You know, Nathan, I'm organizing a recital for the end of the month. I'd like you to be our main attraction. What do you think?" The boy's face lit up. "That would be wonderful. Can I play the piece I'm composing?" "You're composing music?" Amy asked, genuinely surprised. Nathan nodded, a little shy now. It's about a dream I have. About a woman with long hair who calls to me, and about a buffalo that protects me in the darkness." The teacher felt an inexplicable shiver run down her spine. There was something in the way Nathan spoke, a depth that transcended his age. "I'd love to hear it when it's ready," she said, helping him pack up his things. "Now let's go. Your father must be waiting." Outside the school, Jack waited in his worn pickup truck. Seeing his son coming out the gate, accompanied by the teacher, he felt the familiar pride warm his chest. Nathan was a true gift in their lives, a miracle that had arrived unexpectedly on that stormy night. "How was class, champ?" he asked, as soon as Nathan settled in the passenger seat. "Amazing, Dad. Teacher Amy invited me to play at the recital," Jack smiled, starting the engine. "That deserves a celebration. How about some ice cream before we head home?" As he drove down the dirt road that bordered the Buffalo Reserve, Jack noticed unusual activity. Luxury vehicles and men in suits, figures completely out of context in that small town, were moving about the place. "I wonder what's happening over there," he murmured to himself. Nathan, even without being able to see, turned his face toward the reserve. "He's arrived," he said simply, with a seriousness that didn't match his age. "Who, son?" "The man from my dreams, the one who's always crying." Jack felt a chill run down his spine. He slowed down, carefully observing the vehicles, entering the property. One of them, a black limousine, caught his attention. Through the partially open window, he glimpsed the profile of a middle-aged man, with graying hair at the temples and a severe expression. Something about that face awakened a distant memory. Jack frowned, trying to recall where he might have seen him before. And then, like lightning, the memory struck him. It was the man from the newspaper, the one who frequently appeared in news about business and economics. Richard Harrison, the magnate. "Nathan, we're going straight home," he said, accelerating the truck. "The ice cream can wait for another day." In the seat beside him, the boy remained silent, but his fingers tightly gripped the small amulet hidden under his t-shirt. Inside, unbeknownst to anyone, The object had begun to emit a subtle warmth, as if responding to a nearby presence. At the entrance to the reserve, Richard stepped out of the limousine, feeling the humid air of the coastal region fill his lungs. The smell of the sea mixed with that of the dense vegetation brought back sensations he had suppressed for years. He was back at the scene of his most difficult decision, at the stage of his greatest regret. "This way, Mr. Harrison," indicated the property manager, visibly nervous about the unexpected visit from the owner. "The buffalo are in the north pasture, where we've observed the most unusual behaviors." Richard adjusted his expensive suit, out of place in that rural environment, and followed the employee. With each step, he felt the weight of his past, becoming more tangible, more real. It was as if the very earth beneath his feet knew his story and silently judged him. "Want to see that buffalo," he said firmly. "The one called Shadow." "Impossible," murmured the reserve manager, observing the now empty pasture. "They were all here less than an hour ago." Richard scanned the green vastness that stretched before him, feeling frustration grow. The sun was beginning to set on the horizon, painting the sky with orange hues that contrasted with the dark clouds approaching. "Find them," he ordered dryly. "I didn't come all this way to return empty-handed." The manager swallowed hard, fearing the powerful businessman's anger. "I'll organize a search immediately, sir. But I need to warn you that Shadow, he's not like the other buffalo. Nobody can get close to him." "I can," Richard stated, with a conviction that surprised even himself. While the team mobilized to locate the missing herd, Richard remained alone on the porch of the reserve headquarters. In his mind, fragments of the past mingled with the present like pieces of a puzzle that refused to form a complete picture. He remembered Sarah, his wife, and the serene smile she maintained until the end. "You don't understand now, Richard," she had said on her hospital bed, her voice already weak. "But our son has a greater purpose. There's a connection that comes from generations." At the time he attributed those words to the delirium caused by medications. Sarah always had a mystical side that contrasted with his own pragmatism. It was one of the many differences that initially attracted them, and that over time transformed into abysses. The sound of a phone interrupted his thoughts. It was Michael, who had stayed in the improvised office. "Sir, we found something interesting in the local records. There are records of a Morgan family who found an abandoned baby 7 years ago. The date coincides." "Where do they live?" Richard felt his heart accelerate. "On a small property on the outskirts of town, but there's something else you need to know. The boy, he's blind." Richard hung up the phone without responding, trying to process the information. So the son he had abandoned had survived. By some inexplicable miracle, Nathan was alive. And not only that, he had apparently established some kind of connection with the animals of the reserve, especially with the mysterious black buffalo. "There's a connection that comes from generations," Sarah's voice echoed again in his mind. In the Morgan household, the atmosphere was tense. Jack had told Ellen about the magnate's arrival, and they both shared the same fear. What if he came after Nathan? "We can't allow it," Ellen declared, with the fierce determination of a mother. "Nathan is our son no matter what happens," Jack nodded, embracing her. "Nobody is going to take him from us, but we need to be cautious. Richard Harrison is a powerful man." In his room, oblivious to his parents' conversation, Nathan was playing a soft melody on his small keyboard. His fingers danced over the keys with impressive precision, while his mind wandered to places only he could see. Suddenly, he stopped. A strange sensation ran through his body, as if someone were calling him. He stood up and walked to the open window, feeling the wind that announced the imminent storm. "Shadow?" he called softly. "Are you there?" A deep sound, almost imperceptible, answered from somewhere in the darkness. Nathan smiled. Without hesitation, the boy took the coat hanging behind the door, and with the skill of someone who knows every inch of that space, headed out of his room. The house was quiet. His parents were probably talking in the kitchen, as they did every night. With light steps, Nathan made his way down the hallway, descended the stairs, and reached the back door. He knew he shouldn't go out alone, especially at night, but something stronger propelled him. As soon as he stepped into the yard, he felt the imposing presence of the buffalo approaching. The animal touched its muzzle to his hand in a silent caress. "You want to show me something, don't you?" Nathan whispered, stroking the animal's thick fur. "Let's go then." With a confidence that defied his condition, Nathan mounted the buffalo, holding onto the thick fur of its neck. Shadow moved with surprising gentleness, carrying the boy beyond the limits of the property, entering the forest that separated the house from the reserve. Meanwhile, at the reserve headquarters, an employee hurriedly entered. "Mr. Harrison, we found the black buffalo. He's heading toward the lake at the northern border of the property." Richard didn't hesitate. Dismissing the company of the manager or security, he took one of the available jeeps and followed in the indicated direction. Night had already fallen completely, and the vehicle's headlights cut through the darkness like knives. As he approached the lake, he decelerated. There was something in the air, an almost palpable tension. He parked the jeep and continued on foot, guided by the moonlight that occasionally emerged between the heavy clouds. That's when he saw them. The enormous black buffalo standing at the edge of the lake, majestic like a living statue. And upon it, a small figure that Richard immediately recognized, even without ever having seen it grow. Nathan. Time seemed to freeze. Richard felt his legs weaken, forcing him to lean on a nearby tree. The son he had abandoned was there, just a few meters away. The boy he believed to be a burden, a mistake, a stain on his perfect lineage, now seemed to possess a natural dignity that left him speechless. "I knew you would come," Nathan's childish voice broke the silence of the night. "They told me." "They?" Richard managed to ask, his voice choked with contained emotion. "The animals," Nathan replied naturally. "They speak to me, especially Shadow." As if understanding he was being mentioned, the buffalo emitted a deep sound, moving its head majestically. "That's impossible," murmured Richard, more to himself than to the boy. Nathan smiled, a smile that painfully reminded him of Sarah. "Many things seem impossible until they happen, isn't that right? Like a father abandoning his son on a deserted road. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give a like. Tell us what city you're watching from. We continue. Nathan's words hit Richard like a physical blow. The businessman felt the air escape from his lungs, while the guilt he had carried for years finally found its judge, the abandoned son himself. How do you know that?" he asked with a trembling voice, taking a hesitant step toward the boy. The black buffalo emitted a deep warning sound, making Richard stop where he was. Nathan caressed the animal's fur, reassuring it. "It's okay, Shadow, he needs to hear this." The boy slid to the ground with surprising agility for someone who couldn't see. His eyes, though blind to the physical world, seemed to see beyond appearances. "I always knew," Nathan replied, with a maturity that contrasted with his age. "Not with words or memories, but in here." He touched his own chest. "And Shadow showed me the rest." "Showed you? How could an animal?" "He was there that night," Nathan interrupted. "He was the one who protected me until my parents found me, and since then, we've had a connection." The rain began to fall, first in sparse drops that soon transformed into a steady downpour. Neither of them moved to seek shelter. The water that ran down Richard's face mixed with the tears he finally allowed himself to shed. "Nathan, He hesitated, searching for words that could express the whirlwind of emotions consuming him. "I don't expect your forgiveness. What I did has no justification." "Why did you abandon me?" The boy's direct question contained more curiosity than accusation. "Was it because I couldn't see?" Richard felt the weight of that innocent question crushing him inside. How could he explain to a 7-year-old boy the fears and prejudices that had guided him? How could he justify a decision based on pride and arrogance? "Yes," he finally answered, opting for the raw truth. "I was a fool who believed that perfection was what mattered, that a child with a disability would tarnish the legacy I had built." A thunderbolt split the sky, momentarily illuminating the scene. Father and son, separated by years of absence, with an imposing buffalo as a silent guardian. "My mother knew," Nathan said after a moment of silence. "Isn't that right? She knew I would be different." The mention of Sarah brought a new wave of emotions. Richard remembered his wife's last words, spoken between weak breaths on her hospital bed. "He will see what we cannot see." "Yes, she knew," he confirmed. "Sarah always had a special sensitivity, a connection with the natural world that I never fully understood. She came from a traditional family from the countryside, descendants of indigenous healers. She always talked about ancestral knowledge, about a harmony between humans and animals that had been lost over time." Nathan listened attentively, absorbing every word about the mother he had never known. "At first I found it charming," continued Richard, lost in memories. "It was exotic, different from my world of business and pragmatism, but when she became pregnant and began to have dreams, visions about our son, I got scared. She said you would be a guardian, that you would have special abilities. And when I was born without sight, it was confirmation that I didn't want this path for my family," Richard completed, ashamed of his own words. When she left us after childbirth, I made the most cowardly decision of my life." The silence that followed was filled only by the sound of rain falling on leaves and the surface of the lake. Nathan seemed to process everything he had heard, his young face reflecting an understanding beyond his years. "She left me something," he finally said, removing the small amulet he kept hidden under his t-shirt. It was an ancient-looking medallion with carved symbols that Richard immediately recognized. "Your mother's locket," he murmured, instinctively extending his hand, but then pulling back. "She wore it constantly. She said it had been passed down through generations in her family, always to those who had the gift. The gift of speaking with animals? Of seeing beyond the visible," Richard corrected. "Your mother used to say that true vision doesn't depend on the eyes." As if responding to those words, the amulet in Nathan's hands began to emit a soft glow, almost imperceptible in the darkness of the rainy night. Richard's eyes widened, incredulous at the phenomenon. "It's glowing, isn't it?" asked Nathan, surprising Richard. "I can feel the heat, but I can also see a light in my mind." "Yes, it is," confirmed Richard, taking a hesitant step toward his son. At that moment, a distant cry cut through the night. It was a woman's voice, filled with desperation. "Nathan! Nathan! Where are you?" "It's my mom," said the boy, referring to Ellen. "She must be worried." Richard felt a pang of jealousy hearing Nathan call another woman mother, but quickly suppressed it. What right did he have to feel any kind of ownership over this son he had abandoned? "You need to go back to her," he said, with a resigned sadness in his voice. "You didn't finish telling me about my real mother," Nathan protested, "and about this gift she mentioned." "There will be time," Richard replied, surprised by his own words. Could it be possible to rebuild some kind of relationship with the son he had rejected? "If you want, we can talk again." Nathan nodded, but before he could respond, the buffalo became agitated, emitting warning sounds. In the distance, beyond, Ellen's cries, male voices, and the sound of approaching engines could be heard. "Those are my men," said Richard, recognizing the voices, "and it seems your adoptive parents are also looking for you." Nathan approached the buffalo, which lowered its head, allowing the boy to climb onto its back again. "I have to go, they're worried," he said urgently. "But I want to know more about my mother, about this gift." Richard hesitated, torn between the desire to keep his son there and the awareness that he had no right to do so. "Meet me tomorrow right here at sunset," he finally proposed. "I'll bring something that belonged to your mother, something that might help understand your gift." The boy nodded, holding firmly onto the buffalo's fur. "Shadow knows the way," he said simply. Before Richard could respond, the immense animal turned and disappeared into the forest with surprising agility, taking Nathan with it. The businessman remained motionless for a few moments, trying to process everything that had happened. The encounter with the abandoned son had awakened emotions he thought had died long ago. Composing himself, he returned to the jeep and drove back to the reserve headquarters, where his employees were still organizing searches. Michael came to Meet him as soon as he arrived. Mr. Harrison, we found some of the buffalo, but Shadow is still— Cancel the searches, Richard interrupted, his tone leaving no room for questions. And prepare the jet to return to Chicago tomorrow night. I have something to retrieve there before we come back. Michael nodded, confused by his boss's sudden change in attitude, but knew better than to question it. In the Morgan home, tension was palpable. Ellen hugged Nathan tightly as soon as the boy entered through the door, accompanied by Jack, who had found him walking by the roadside already close to home. "Never do that again," exclaimed Ellen, divided between relief and anger. "We were desperate." "I'm sorry, Mom," replied Nathan, genuinely sorry for the suffering he had caused, but Shadow needed to show me something important. Jack and Ellen exchanged worried looks. Nathan's connection with the buffalo had always been a source of amazement, but what was happening now seemed to transcend any rational explanation. "Son, we need to talk about your nighttime outings," Jack began in a serious tone. "It's dangerous to walk alone in the forest, especially at night." "I'm never alone, Dad," Nathan responded with simplicity. "Shadow is always with me, and now there's another person who wants to meet me." Ellen's heart raced. "What person, Nathan?" The boy hesitated for a moment, as if considering how much he should reveal. "My real father," he finally said. "Richard Harrison." The color drained from Ellen's face. Her greatest fears were coming true. Jack placed his hand on her shoulder in a gesture of silent support. How do you know this?" she asked with a trembling voice. "I talked with him today at the lake. He told me about my mother, about how she knew I would have a special gift." Ellen sat down, feeling her legs weaken. The possibility of losing Nathan to his biological father, a powerful man with infinite resources, was her worst nightmare. "Nathan, dear," she began, choosing her words carefully. "Richard Harrison is a very rich and influential man, but he left you when you were just a baby." "I know, Mom," Nathan interrupted gently. "I know what he did, but I also know that people can change. I can feel that in him." Jack knelt before his son, holding his small hands between his own, calloused from hard work. "You want to get to know him better?" he asked, fearing. The answer. Nathan nodded. "I want to understand who I am, where I came from. I want to know more about the gift my biological mother mentioned." He paused, squeezing his adoptive father's hands. "But that doesn't mean I'll stop being your son. You are my parents, the ones who took me in and loved me when he abandoned me." Ellen couldn't contain her tears. She stood up and hugged her son again, feeling a mixture of pride in the boy's maturity and fear of what might happen. "We arranged to meet tomorrow at sunset," Nathan continued. "He said he would bring something that belonged to my biological mother." Jack and Ellen exchanged worried looks. The situation was slipping out of their control, but at the same time they understood Nathan's need to know his origins. "We'll go with you," Jack declared in a tone that admitted no discussion. Nathan smiled, relieved. "Thank you, Dad. I knew you would understand." Later, while his parents talked in low voices in the kitchen, Nathan remained in his room, the small amulet between his fingers. The object seemed to vibrate with its own energy, as if responding to the boy's touch. He closed his eyes, concentrating on the sensation. Suddenly, a flow of images filled his mind. A woman with long, dark hair, with the same features as his, cradling a baby while humming. An open field where buffalo grazed freely. A great oak imposing and ancient, with roots that seemed to penetrate deeply into the earth. "Mom?" whispered Nathan, feeling tears stream down his face. In response, he felt an intense heat emanate from the amulet, followed by a soft voice that seemed to come from within his own mind. "The true gift is not in the eyes, my son, but in the heart that sees beyond the visible." Nathan opened his eyes, startled and amazed at the same time. The room, which had always been a space of darkness for him, now seemed different. He couldn't see clearly, but he could distinguish shapes, shadows, and lights where before there was nothing. He jumped up, his heart racing. He moved around the room, realizing that he could identify the silhouettes of furniture, the window, the door. It wasn't normal vision, he knew that, It was something different, as if he could perceive the essence of things, their vital energy. "It's incredible," he murmured to himself, trying to understand what was happening. Outside the house, Shadow remained vigilant, his eyes fixed on Nathan's bedroom window. The buffalo emitted a deep sound, as if approving of what was happening. Around him, other animals began to gather. Birds perched on nearby branches, small rodents emerged from the vegetation, and even other buffalo from the reserve appeared. In the distance. The next morning, the day dawned with a peculiar clarity after the storm. Nathan woke up feeling different. The new perception he had experienced the night before remained, although more subtle in the daylight. He couldn't see details or colors like people with normal vision, but he could distinguish energetic outlines, faint auras that emanated from living beings. He sat on the bed, trying to process this change. The amulet, still around his neck, emitted a comforting warmth against his skin. Nathan held it between his fingers, feeling its ancient inscriptions. Something was awakening inside him, something that transcended his childish understanding. "Nathan?" Ellen's voice sounded from the other side of the door. "Breakfast is ready, son." "Coming, Mom," he replied, tucking the amulet under his shirt, before getting up. In the kitchen, Ellen and Jack were talking in low voices when Nathan entered. The boy immediately perceived the tension in the air, not only from the tone of their voices, but from the new energetic forms he could now perceive around his adoptive parents. "Good morning," he greeted, sitting at the table. Ellen placed a plate of pancakes in front of him with her usual care. "Son, we've been talking about the meeting with Richard Harrison," Jack began, hesitant. "We think maybe we should postpone it a bit. Get to know his intentions better before allowing you to—" "He's going to bring something that belonged to my biological mother," Nathan interrupted with unusual determination. "I need to know who I am, Dad. Please, don't stop me." The silence that followed was loaded with conflicting emotions. Ellen held her husband's hand under the table, her eyes watery. "We're afraid of losing you," she finally confessed, her voice breaking. "Richard Harrison has money and power to—" "You'll never lose me," Nathan assured, extending his hand to touch his adoptive mother's face. "You are my family, nothing will change that." The simplicity and conviction in the boy's words disarmed his parents. They exchanged looks of resigned understanding. Denying Nathan the right to know his origins would be unfair, no matter how much they feared the consequences. "All right," Jack finally agreed. "We'll go to the meeting today as planned, but we'll be with you the whole time." Nathan smiled, relieved. "Thank you. And there's one more thing I need to tell you." He hesitated, uncertain about how to explain the inexplicable. "I think I'm starting to see, not like other people, but in a different way." Ellen almost dropped the cup she was holding. "What do you mean, son?" "It's hard to explain. It's like luminous shadows around things. I started to notice it last night, after the amulet got warm in my hands." Jack and Ellen exchanged concerned looks. The story sounded like fantasy, but they knew Nathan too well to doubt his sincerity. "Can you see me now?" Jack asked, moving closer. "Not your face or your clothes," Nathan explained, "but I see a form of light like an outline. It's more intense near your heart and your head." The fisherman felt a shiver run down his spine. As incredible as it seemed, there was a deep truth in his son's words. He recalled the night they found Nathan, the mysterious presence of the buffalo, the boy's inexplicable connection with animals. Perhaps there was more between heaven and earth than his simple understanding could encompass. "I believe you," he said simply, hugging his son. Meanwhile, miles away, Richard Harrison was disembarking from his private jet at O'Hare International Airport after a quick trip to Chicago. Michael awaited him on the tarmac, visibly confused by his boss's haste. "The car is ready, sir. Are we going straight to company headquarters?" "No," Richard replied, checking his watch. "We're going to my house. I need to retrieve something personal before returning to Pine Creek." In the luxurious apartment overlooking Grant Park, Richard dismissed the staff and headed to his private study, a room he kept locked and where no one, not even the housekeepers, had permission to enter. He unlocked the door with a key he always carried with him and entered the dark, dusty environment. Into the center of the study, an old carved wooden chest waited untouched for years. Richard approached it with reverence, feeling the weight of the history that object carried. It had belonged to Sarah's family, passed down through generations of women with the gift of vision beyond the ordinary. He opened it slowly, revealing its precious contents: diaries, old photographs, small ritual objects, and at the bottom, wrapped in a piece of faded silk, an ancient-looking book, with an elaborately worked leather cover and pages yellowed by time. "The Code of the Guardians," said the title in golden letters, almost faded away. Richard had never given importance to those fairy tales, as he used to call Sarah's family traditions. Now confronted by the inexplicable, by the connection between his son and the animals, by the buffalo that had emerged as a protector, he began to question his skepticism. He carefully leafed through the book, observing the detailed drawings of animals, the descriptions of healing rituals, the passages about the guardians, special individuals who were born with the ability to communicate with the natural world. Specific paragraphs mentioned rare cases of guardians who, deprived of common sight, developed a much more powerful inner vision. "Nathan," he murmured, finally understanding what Sarah had tried to explain to him years ago. He carefully put the book in his briefcase and, after a moment's hesitation, also took a framed photograph he had kept hidden from everyone. In it, Sarah smiled serenely, 6 months pregnant, with protective hands over her belly. In the background, almost imperceptible to anyone who didn't know what to look for, the silhouette of a black buffalo stood out in the landscape. With these treasures in hand, Richard returned to the airport, determined to correct the mistake he had made 7 years before. He had no illusions that he could simply resume his place in Nathan's life. The Morgans were the boy's true parents now, but perhaps he could help him understand his gift, honor Sarah's legacy. In Pine Creek, the day passed slowly for Nathan, anxious for the scheduled meeting. He spent the hours practicing piano, concentrating on the melodies to calm the whirlwind of emotions he felt. As he played, he noticed something surprising. His new visual perception intensified with the music. The musical notes seemed to create luminous patterns in the air, dancing in sync with the melody. "Amazing," he murmured, marveling at the discovery. When the sun finally began to set, painting the sky with orange hues, the Morgan family prepared for the meeting. Jack, Ellen, and Nathan walked together along the trail that led to the lake, each immersed in their own thoughts and fears. At the water's edge, Richard was already waiting for them, alone. He had dismissed security guards and advisors, understanding that this moment required intimacy. Seeing the family approaching, he felt a mixture of contradictory emotions: gratitude to the Morgans for taking care of his son, envy for having experienced Nathan's early years, regret for the lost time. "You came," Nathan stated with a smile, perceiving the intense aura emanating from his biological father. "I promised I would," Richard replied, noticing how the boy seemed different, more confident, more connected. Nathan, the boy who had been born without common sight but with an extraordinary vision of the world, had found his purpose. The guardian of the buffalo, as he would be known in the years to come, had become the link between two worlds that had grown apart. In the months following that afternoon by the lake, life in Pine Creek was significantly transformed. The Buffalo Reserve underwent extensive restructuring, becoming not just a sanctuary for animals, but a center for healing and ancestral knowledge. Richard Harrison, previously obsessed only with the growth of his business empire, redirected a considerable part of his resources to the project. Environmental consultants, specialized veterinarians, and researchers were hired, always under Nathan's guidance, who, even at just 7 years old, demonstrated a wisdom that transcended his age. Jack and Ellen remained the fundamental pillars in the boy's life. Their house continued to be the loving home where Nathan would grow up with the values of simplicity and honesty that formed his character. Richard acquired a property nearby, where he spent more and more time getting to know the son he had, abandoned and seeking day by day to redeem himself for his mistake. The most significant transformation, however, occurred in Nathan himself. His ability to perceive energies and communicate with animals developed exponentially. With guidance from the ancient book of the Guardians and the constant tutelage of Shadow, the boy learned to control and direct his extraordinary gift. On the first anniversary of that decisive afternoon, a special celebration was organized at the Reserve. Local residents, researchers, veterinarians, and admirers from various parts of the country gathered to witness what many called the miracle of Pine Creek. On a simple platform, decorated with wildflowers, Nathan waited alongside. His three parents, Ellen and Jack on one side, Richard on the other. Shadow, more imposing than ever, remained nearby, as the faithful guardian he had always been. "I want to thank everyone for being here," Nathan began, his childish voice surprisingly clear and confident. "What we celebrate today is not just the success of the Reserve, but the beginning of a journey of reconnection. For a long time, we humans have drifted away from the wisdom of nature. We've forgotten how to listen, how to respect, how to live in harmony." A respectful silence hung over the audience. Even those who initially doubted the stories about the boy who talked to animals now observed, impressed, the tangible results of his work. Animals recovered from deep traumas, lands once degraded flourishing again, and mainly people transformed by contact with this new form of healing. "The knowledge I've rediscovered through my biological mother's legacy doesn't belong to me," Nathan continued. "It belongs to all of us, just as this land belongs to the animals that have lived here long before we existed." He raised the Book of the Guardians, which he now always kept with him. "The pages of this book contain ancient wisdom, but it only comes to life when put into practice. Our work here is just beginning." At the end of his speech, something extraordinary happened. All the animals of the reserve, buffalo, horses, birds, small mammals, approached in an impressive demonstration of trust and connection. Not even the most skeptical could deny the strength of the bond that Nathan had established. Later, when the crowd had already dispersed, only the closest people remained. Nathan sat by the edge of the lake, in the same place where he had first met Richard. Shadow rested beside him, as always. "What are you thinking about, son?" Ellen asked, approaching. "About how everything is connected," Nathan replied, smiling. "About how my biological mother knew this day would come, even without being here to see it." Richard, who was observing from a distance, felt a tightness in his chest upon hearing those words. He approached hesitantly, still unsure of his place in that peculiar family circle. "She would be very proud," he said, his voice breaking. "Sarah always believed in balance, in harmony, and you, Nathan, are accomplishing what she only dreamed of." The boy nodded, feeling his mother's presence in some inexplicable way. "The amulet," he said, touching the object he had never removed from his neck. "Sometimes when I'm among the animals, I feel as if she were with me, guiding my steps." Jack, who had joined the group, put his hand on his son's shoulder. "Some bonds transcend time and space, Nathan. Your biological mother, even physically absent, left a living legacy through you." The fisherman's simple words contained a profound truth that everyone there understood. Nathan's journey, begun in abandonment and pain, had transformed into a story of redemption and purpose. At sunset, with the sky tinged with orange hues, the expanded family contemplated the horizon, each immersed in their own thoughts. The future, once uncertain, now unfolded with vibrant colors of hope. The saga of the Guardian of the Buffalo was just beginning. In the years to come, the small town of Pine Creek would become known far beyond regional borders. People from different parts of the world would come in search of rediscovered ancestral wisdom, of healing provided by genuine contact with nature, of reconnection with something that humanity had lost in its incessant pursuit of progress. Nathan would grow strong and wise, balancing the simplicity of his upbringing with Jack and Ellen and the opportunities that Richard's support provided. His special vision would continue to develop, allowing him to perceive not only the energies of living beings, but also the imbalances that needed to be harmonized. Shadow, the faithful guardian, would remain by his side, a living symbol of the protection that had never been lacking. even in the darkest moments. And the legacy of Sarah Harrison, the mother who departed too soon, would flourish through the son she left behind, bearer of a gift that transcended common understanding. In the small town of Pine Creek, between the sea and the forest, where an abandoned baby had been welcomed by an unlikely guardian, a new story was being written, no longer of loss and separation, but of union and shared purpose. The story of the boy who, deprived of common sight, had learned to see the extraordinary in the ordinary, the sacred in the everyday, connection where others saw only separation. The story of the guardian of the buffalo, the boy who had taught everyone a simple but profound truth.